Why do we even have keys and scales? So let's agree on this much. Music is about creating anticipation by telling our listener where we're planning on going and then going there or not going there on purpose. In other words, is a mean thing to do, but that's allowed. That's music. That's me telling you what to expect and then finally paying it off. Now, I can also delay the gratification by doing something else first, like... Now, as we go through that, we get to the end and you hear, oh, yeah, that was kind of a cool thing what he did at the end. If we could slow down your thought process, though, to the subconscious level, it'd probably be something like... Oh, yeah, I recognize this. I know what he's going to do. He's going to go to that next note. Oh, no, he played the wrong note. That sounds terrible. I hate. Never mind. I forgive him. That sounded really cool. So we retroactively go back and forgive what sounded like mistakes as long as it, in the end, kind of gets paid off. Scales and keys are just easy patterns, recognizable patterns that we can use to set up our audience for what they should expect so that we can either break the rules on purpose or pay off what we've been promising them. So a major scale, by the way, a key and a scale is pretty much the same thing. A key is just the concept of like the key of C just means that we'd play all white notes, right? I haven't actually played anything, but I've conveyed the key of C to you. But a scale is playing all of the notes of a key in that order. So that's a scale because I took the key of C and then I just laid out all of the notes in a row. So a scale is just executing a key with the notes in order. Usually you don't play all the notes in order in real life. You play them all in different orders and stuff, like the way you would sing it. Okay, so the key of C, or the C major scale, is just going to take this note right here that we're going to call the root because it's the root of the scale. It's the name of the scale, C, and we're going up a whole step, and then a whole step, and then a half step, and then a whole step, and then a whole step, and then I'm almost done. A whole step, and then a half step. If we follow that pattern of root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, or root plus 2 whole steps, half step, 3 whole steps, half step, that's a major scale, and everyone kind of knows what to expect when I go. They know that I'm going to be going to that note right there. So that's a major scale, or a key, a major key, or is just this set of notes that is root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now we can create any major key using that pattern. We're not going to pay attention to whether we're using black notes or white notes. So if we go like the key of E flat would be like that note, that's an E flat, and then we go up a whole step, and then a whole step, and then a half step, and then a whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, and we end up with... And that pattern sounds like a major scale, sounds like a major key. And we're going to use those notes to create our song and create expectation. In the same way that, like, if I give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then if I go like 25, 26, 27, 28, you know to expect a 29 next because that's the thing that we're doing. Now, those were entirely different numbers. So, like, I wasn't paying attention to like, are we including a 6 in this? Or are we including a 7 in this? I just went to the next one and the next one and the next one. So major scales are the same way. It's just a pattern. We don't pay attention to black notes and white notes. It's the pattern of root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, regardless of what exact notes that entails. Now, there's nothing particularly special about a major scale, except that it's a set of notes that is easy to hear and it's very predictable. It's used a whole lot in the same way that like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's an easy pattern. Like pretty much anyone can grab a hold of that one. There are other patterns though too that are almost just as common, like 2, 4, 6, 8. That one's so common, we all want to say, who do we appreciate after we say that? Because it's a really common pattern, and then if you don't have to be at too high a level in order to figure out, oh, so they're skipping over one each time. So that's another pattern that we could use, and we use that pattern. We go 32, 34, 36, and then a little bit of math, and 38 is the next one, right? So it's the same idea. It's a little bit more complex pattern. It's a little bit harder to follow, but it's not as hard as something like, I don't know, prime numbers or something like that. So these are all just patterns that we can use to create different expectations inside of our listeners. So when we use a major scale and we stay inside of that pattern, everyone's used to hearing that, and so it's really predictable, which means it's easy to set up people for what to expect next, because everyone knows we're just going to stay inside this pattern. That's why if you just go turn on your radio, you're going to hear something that's probably in a major key, because you can sell records with songs that are in major keys. They also have like atonal music or 12-tone music, which is music that is not in a key, and it's just you can play any of the 12. It sounds better than that, hopefully, but there's no like rule about like this is where you're supposed to go at the end of the song, or here's where the expectations are supposed to be, and it sounds exactly like you would expect. It's just really hard to predict where it's going, and there's no sense of like centeredness, which is great if you're trying to write music that doesn't have like a feeling of centeredness. If you want to write a track to go along with Alice Falling Down the Rabbit Hole, you don't want to use that doesn't follow that thing. You need something that's chaotic and crazy. So there's places for all of the different scales and patterns that we could use, but the most predictable ones are going to be the major scales. Then like after that, you could do like this right here. So that's the C major scale. It's just as predictable as the E flat major scale, because it's still the same pattern: root, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So it's the same pattern. So your listeners don't care whether you're playing black notes or white notes. They just care whether they can predict what you're going to be playing next or not. So we can use that C major scale. And then what we do is we lower the third scale degree, 1, 2, 3. We lower it to there. And then we lower the sixth scale degree, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we also lower the seventh scale degree. So we lower the third, the sixth, the seventh to those, and we play the rest of it normal. So we play C major, but we lower the 3, the 6, and the 7, and we come up with, and we call this C minor. So if you turn on the radio and you're not hearing a major key, you're probably hearing a minor key. So this would be like that 2, 4, 6, 8 thing. Like pretty much everyone can grasp it, but we would, if you were teaching someone the patterns, you would probably start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before you get to 2, 4, 6, 8, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is way easier to process. And honestly, 2, 4, 6, 8 is kind of built on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even though they're two entirely different patterns. That's kind of like major scales and minor scales. Like really, in reality, they're two entirely different things, but one is definitely easier to get to, and you can get to the other one from the first one. So we can take a major scale and alter it and get the minor scale, even though you wouldn't use probably both of those in the same song in most cases. I know there are exceptions. Okay, so then major scales and minor scales, and then there's all kinds of other scales and modes and stuff too. And that's where we start getting into patterns that would be like prime numbers. Like, those are really, really interesting to the people who are interested in those, and they're basically school and torture for all the rest of us who just aren't really that into it. And that's where we get into like jazz and stuff like that, and that's other scales that aren't as common as the major and minor scales. That's why a lot of people don't like jazz, is because it's using patterns. It's definitely technically a higher level, but it's all the same exact stuff. All the people who are used to like prime numbers and stuff, they just know the series of prime numbers, or maybe you know the sequence of pi, right? That's not a repeating pattern. Maybe that's a bad example, but you know like the first 5 numbers of pi, and you're really into pi. The people who are really into it, and they're not into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because that's boring to them. So the people who like those patterns really like those patterns. The people who like jazz really like the jazz scales and the sounds of those stuff. And they're just really into that. But in the end, they're all just alterations of that major scale that we started with. In the same way that any number sequence is going to be some alteration of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, essentially, even though a lot of them get very, very far away from it. It all kind of starts there. So that's why we start with the major scales. It's a set of notes. It's a pattern. It's a construct. It's a framework for you to set up expectations within your listener that you can either fulfill or you can break on purpose, or hopefully you can promise them something and then just delay that gratification and create that suspense and get them listening in more and more and more as they keep hoping maybe now is when he's going to pay it off. So we have something like... And there's going to be several parts where it's time to finally finish it. Oh, I guess he's going to do that again. Oh, he's doing it again? Okay. He's finally going to finish it. Oh, wait, he hasn't finished it yet. He's going to finish it now. Oh, wait, no, hang on. It's almost... Now. Oh, wait, hang on. Now? Yes. Oh, what's that? A little bit of extra color that wasn't expecting in there. So that's what all of this music stuff is, from Bach through Miley Cyrus. I'm sorry for putting those both in the same sentence, but they're all just about creating some kind of anticipation, usually using some common framework, some common scale, some common key, so your listener knows what they can expect next, and then either giving them what you promised or breaking that on purpose. That's why we have keys. That's why we practice scales. That's what we're doing here. Good luck. Have fun.